welcome to the February 25th version of the Stabilization Brigade meeting. We do record these meetings and post them up on YouTube, so please remember that as you speak or share information, that the information will be public. Now that we are starting the recording and starting, please register attendance by doing an ad here in the chat. We do keep meetings via the chat, or meeting minutes via the chat. So if you have something to add to the minutes, please just do at item and then the text you want to add to the minutes, and it will be collected and shared as well. I'm sharing the agenda. So basically the agenda will go over the standard status information about test coverages and JIRAs, and then our plan is to do a JIRA walk to see if there are JIRAs that we want to move out of this release and put into a future release, so we can, again, get within the next, 60 days or so, call this release complete. Just trying to figure out what we actually can get done in that time period. Is there anything else anybody wants to add to the agenda?
I still want to talk about bugs.
Okay, I was thinking the bugs, was that part of the JIRA walk, or is that something different? What do you mean when you want to talk about bugs?
So under JIRA walk, if you wanted to do everything on JIRA, I don't know. I was going to focus on the bugs dashboard.
Okay.
But, we can do it either way.
We can focus, there's 36 items that I was going to go over on the bug walk, or the JIRA walk, which essentially are all items that are open or not resolved, really.
Yeah, this looks good.
Okay. We'll leave it at that then. All right. Getting down to the summary. At topic, code test coverage review. Basically, we're fairly flat on our test coverage. You can see the numbers there, which isn't spectacular, but we're not losing ground at least. It'd be nice if we could up our unit test coverage. But again, time being what it is, I don't actually see that happening for this release. Particularly, so David, some of the resources have gone off as well. Yeah.
Should we drop the SIM adapters and the API server from the list?
Yeah, I think so. Action. I will take that action.
And then I'm wondering, maybe once we get the bugs under control, maybe we could, create some stories for upping the test coverage and dedicating some effort to that.
And again, the goal isn't, yeah, I agree, but the goal isn't just to have good test coverage, or good tests that actually increase coverage, not tests that just increase coverage. I know you know that, right? So we have to be careful that in the past we've had unit tests delivered that, yes, they did improve our numbers, but they didn't actually improve the quality of the code. So we do have to be careful for that balance, but yeah.
Yeah, I think as long as we're diligent on the reviews of the unit tests, someone would have to get a unit test past 2 reviewers to get one in that doesn't really do anything. So yeah, as long as we're all up on our reviews and watching it, I know Kent and I think Kent in particular was watching them really well back when we were doing them a few months ago. So I think both dedicating people to do the tests and dedicating people to focus review on them would help us. But bugs first, I think.
Right, I agree. And additionally, the goal here is, well, the intent was when people contribute code to also contribute tests, which means if you add a new function, or even if you maybe update a function, you should, in the commit there, you should also include unit test changes, right? So if you add a new function, there should be a new unit test. So this unit test writing shouldn't necessarily be seen or viewed as a separate process. It should be viewed and seen as normal development. So when you're adding a new function, first thing you should be doing is writing a new unit test. Okay.
So regarding unit tests, a while ago there was a proposal to change the framework we are using for a test, but I think that has kind of fallen behind. Is
Yeah.
that something we plan to look at a certain point?
Not for this release. As I recall, we looked at that, and at least I was personally struggling to find value in it, right? In over what we currently had. It seemed like a wrapper to provide more description around a test, but it didn't actually make it easier to write tests or anything, right? It didn't change the workload. In fact, it maybe added a little bit more, but the output therefore had more description in it, I think is what I was coming to as a personal conclusion. I don't know what other people were thinking, but at this point, I don't think there's any plan to adopt a new framework.
Okay, thanks.
All right, anything else? Okay, Jira and patch sets. These actually topic, Jira and patch sets. These numbers were taken yesterday. So I know there's been one blocker since then, but it is being addressed. But yesterday there were 34 issues in to-do or in progress, down 18 from 2 weeks ago, and there were no blockers. I know that changed yesterday. There's at least one blocker. 6 of those issues were unassigned. For the past 2 weeks, 19 issues resolved, 15 issues created. The discrepancy in the numbers is some of these issues were moved out of the Brigade to future release because resources that were working on the issues were no longer available. So that's a discrepancy in terms of how we went from down 18 issues, even though the numbers would have been 4. We had 36 open patch sets, 8 of which were over 5 days old. I think Zach abandoned one of those, so we're probably about 7 of which are over 5 days old today. So that's not too bad actually, but we're still a little higher than we want to be in terms of patch sets. So we still have a job to get those reviews done. Part of what we'll do in the next section here, a Jira walk, is see if there are other issues that Jira just hasn't been updated for or that we want to move out as we go forward. Any comments? All right, we'll go through the walk then. So my intent here is really just I've sorted them by date, but I'll resort them by priority. And just kind of walk through them and see if we're going to get a status on some of these. So we have the one blocker here that I believe was undergoing hardware test this morning, according to Matt. Has that completed yet?
Yeah, it finished hardware test and functional test. They went through what I assume is the same set of regression tests that the nightly tests perform.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
about the nightly regression tests, it's funny. When we did it over the weekend, we had I think maybe 5 tests that were failing, and we said, okay, well, this delete OLT is one that we suspect, and so I believe we reverted this patch, and But even then, we had 3 failures remain on the regression tests, which leads me to believe that there were other changes that came in at the same time that are still causing problems. Problems that we don't see with the release that we made last week. The unofficial release that we made last week. So, and we have consistent failures on these tests, even after the revert that we did on Chetishri's patch. So Matt or Girish, if you're online, you might want to take a look at those test results and make a call on whether there are some other patches that we may need to look at.
So I guess this is the tricky part. Is part of the desire to do a point release last week was so that we can start merging in some of these newer features. Features like regarding multicast and delete ONU, and arguably, the potential for disruption is there. So, these merges happen every day, and we could probably go back and over the last week, there have probably been a couple dozen. At some point, we can revert our way all the way back to where we started, or we just have to fix bugs that pop up.
I do think we need to create JIRAs for the bugs for the tests that are failing at this point. Do we, Saurav, do you know which tests those are failing, or can you give a pointer to those?
Yeah, I can send a link to people showing what's failing, but okay, we can go down that path. But the thing is that sanity test is probably not enough, or hardware test is not enough, because hardware test really does the sanity test right now, and mostly it's the restart tests that are failing right now. So some of these things in OpenOLT or OpenONU adapter that have been merged over the last few days, they did not go through the full, the capability that we have to do a full functional test on a patch set. So
I guess the question is, how do we as a community get notified when the tests that are run nightly fail, or there's failures in those?
Notification is easy. We can add that. But I'm actually talking about a different thing that, yes, regression failure notifications can go out to save everyone on the stabilization brigade. The question really is that before it merges, maybe some things we need to change. What we do today, we probably only do hardware test today and maybe add more things before they merge.
Is there, other than just the time to run the test, is there anything preventing us from turning on the full testing we do with sanity test on every merge?
Probably not. Yeah, I mean, it'll probably take an hour to run all the whole suite. But since we are at this critical phase, maybe it's worth it.
Or at least trigger it like we do hardware test when someone gets a +2, then subjected to additional, subjected to the full battery at that point, after the +2, but before it can be finally merged. That way people aren't paying an hour's testing on every incremental little step they make.
Yeah, that's why we had the basically the keywords to add to Jenkins, right? So in some places you can do just hardware tests, which will only do the sanity test. And in other places you can do the full functional suite. Anyway, I don't want to take too much time on this discussion, but just wanted to make more people aware that we still have problems. Despite the revert of Chetishri's patch, we still have other problems in existing master.
Okay, so I'd be okay with Scott's suggestion, if we basically say, look, once a patch gets 2+1s or a +2, however you want to do that, and we then submit it for the full testing, which could take up to an hour before you can hit the submit button on the merge. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. Can that be done?
We need to first fix our tests. Well, not fix our tests, but we have to get them to all passing state first, right? Because if we turn this on now, nothing will get in because everything will fail on the tests that are already failing.
Well, that is impetus to get it fixed, though, right? People only fix what hurts. Yeah, I'm not sure. The question is, I guess, the failures that we're seeing are there multiple sources, or is there a single source? I.e., if I fix it once, it's going to clear up everything, or we really believe it's multiple patch sets that are causing it?
I can't tell. I mean, that's why the people who are more familiar with that, with the code base, have to make that call, to be honest.
All right. I do know, particularly if you're using port forwarding, and I know port forwarding, more specifically, port forwarding with a virtual cluster in kind. If you have a Kubernetes service that maps to a Kubernetes pod, if that pod goes away and then comes back up, that port forward needs to be reestablished. And so I don't know if some of the testing issues or failures are around that or not.
Well, then it would have failed on what we did on the release last week as well.
Okay.
Right? Because the same tests were in that release. So,
okay.
Sorry, David. So the issue that we are seeing right now, most of them, their authentications are failing after restart of the pods. So the other issue which we were talking about, the port forward, that is not that is not the issue.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So these are different.
So authentication failing after core restart. All right. Is there a JIRA open for that yet?
Not yet, but I could send the links to these failures first if somebody wants to look at it, and then probably we can go from there.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and also regarding the patch sets verification for the functional suite, it will really take a long time. So I seriously suggest that it's up to the user, whoever is trying to merge the patch, and then have it user specific runs instead of making it permanent runs for the functional suite, because that takes a long time, almost like 45 minutes.
Okay. So I'm going to consider that kind of a call for kind of all hands on deck. We got to get these issues addressed immediately around authentication, pod restarts. That's a key issue of Kubernetes. If we're not able to handle pod restarts, then we've completely failed at some level. All right, thank you. Any other comments around that?
Thanks, David.
Yeah. All right, let's jump down to the next one.
But coming back to the blocker though, I mean, we reverted the patch. So is Chetashri looking into?
There's already been a patch submitted, and it's undergone hardware test.
And functional test. I think we need to make sure we make the distinction. There's hardware test, which is just the hardware version of Sanity, and then there's functional test, which is the hour-long do everything. This particular patch is both.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just warning you that even the functional test may fail right now, right? Because of these other things that we are seeing even without Chetashri's patch, right?
Yes.
I mean, do you already have results?
For this patch set?
Yeah, 8. I think it was 8 tests attempted, 8 passed. So, okay. I mean, again,
so
if the other tests are 12 or 13 tests, I think between the release and now, I think some new tests were added. Whether those have ever succeeded, given they were never there before, is, that's different. But the 8
No,
test
no.
attempts for functional passed.
Right, so that's functional tests, but there were restart tests that are not part of the functional tests. That's a different suite.
Right. So I don't know if that's available for pre-merge testing.
So it looks to me like there are some tests that are part of the functional tests that are passing on the Tucson pod where we run the hardware tests, and failing pretty consistently on some of the other pods. So I think that might be something that we need to dig into. Like, things are operating a little bit differently in the hardware test pod and the other pods.
I think we should move the hardware test on a cube spray deployment, not on a kind deployment, because I'm operating a kind deployment on here in Berlin. It's kind of sometimes it's I would say cube spray would be more consistent with the actual deployment in production.
Cube spray is, again, you're using VMs or physical machines. You're not doing Docker and Docker, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
The original purpose of kind wasn't really to be a perfect environment. It was to be light enough for developers to run and test. That was my understanding.
Yeah, for testing like we're doing now on the Tucson pod, kind seems like a fine tool. I'm not sure what we would really gain by switching over to cube spray.
Anyway, I don't think we should derail David's meeting or the Stabilization Brigade meeting on that particular discussion. So nevertheless, let's continue to talk on Slack about Chetashree's patch and let David move on down this list.
All right, Scott, need to clean Vol 2631, clean up topics on inter-container proxy.
Yeah, so this one is almost done. The bulk of it was just uncommenting 3 lines that were commented out since inception, I think, because there were some issues back then that have subsequently been fixed. I have one nit left to fix in the open OLT adapter where when you shut down the OLT adapter, it panics rather than does a clean shutdown.
Okay.
So that's almost a separate bug, but it prevents this from being fixed. So I'm just going to roll them together.
Okay. OLT, Garesh, OLT left in device list after delete.
Yeah, actually, I've been trying to reproduce this problem, but I'm not seeing it for last 1 week or so. I also saw Andy has indicated that in the sanity test he's been running in Jenkins, I think it is not happening anymore. So a delete after disable seems to be working fine in a sequence. So.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think when we did the release last week, one of the key things was that we had to have reliable OLT disable delete. So since we started having that, I think we are good on this one.
So you think this one can then just be marked as non-reproducible and move on?
Yeah.
All right, so let's just, Garesh, can you mark that as non-reproducible then?
Yeah, sure, I'll do that.
Okay. ONU adapter reconcile. Matt.
Yeah, it currently does not exist yet. Still working on it. Just so we're clear, if you try to restart the ONU adapter today, it is in a non-recoverable state. This has been the case since the migration to 2.x. So
yeah,
that work is.
We've held back the automated test for that. We know the functionality isn't there yet.
Okay. Restart ONU adapter. Okay. All right. OLT reboot using Edge Core.
Yeah, I can comment on that. There are various forms of OLT reboot. There's the disable delete that we were talking about earlier that results in a reboot of the OLT. That one is fine. So that one is not what this story is about. This story is about okay, in operation, everything is going fine, and suddenly the hardware reboots. Okay, so actually, this one is not about that. There is another story about the hardware rebooting. This one, I think, is about soft reboot, where there's actually a vote_ctl command where you can, do
Yes.
device whatever reboot, right? And so today, neither the soft nor the hard reboot works. And that's my opinion. I don't know if Amit or Chetashri feel differently, but I'm sort of trying to figure out what is the right set of behaviors we should see across the stack um, for a hardware, for a hard or a soft reboot. But I'll stop talking now and let Chetashri or Amit comment.
Chetashri or Amit, do you have a comment on that? Are they online?
Yeah, hi David. So regarding
Hi.
this faulty reboot, so we have two things in plate now. So one is soft reboot and another one is hard reboot. So I just thought like we have device state refactoring also in task list. So do we need to take this up once that get resolved, or is it fine to go ahead and fix this both scenarios and making it in working state?
Try that again. What is the other change that you're talking about?
We have an epic called device states refactoring, which is
Okay.
all to deal with new device states, which we have already discussed and concluded in
Yep.
TST. So do we need to refactor OpenOLT adapter according to the new device states and start working on OLT soft and hard reboot, or is it fine to go ahead and fix this now and later take up that epic?
So it's really a prioritization. Are the new state changes a priority over this?
Yeah, actually, we have a connection state currently, and with the new device state proposal, we don't have the connection state. So there will be a lot of chance in OpenOLT adapter code refactoring. So this may break also. We need some time to look onto this. That's why I haven't started looking into these features.
Okay. My gut feel says that the state change is a higher priority than this, but other people have thoughts?
So then the natural question to ask is, what is the status of the state change?
Yeah.
And so is Ken online?
Yes, Ken is online. There's a dependency on the Protos changes, and I can't remember who actually was working on the Proto changes. And until that goes in, then nothing else can be done in terms of status updates.
Is there a JIRA for those proto changes?
I think there is.
Yeah, to update on this changes for Ultra Protos. So I have it in my name and it's up for review. So people can go through the patch set, and if everything is fine, then we can freeze that code changes and we can start looking on refactoring other repos as well.
You mark it as work in progress. Is it work in progress, or is it actually ready for review?
And it's not working progress, just to make sure that it won't, I mean, there were like a lot of discussion on the Ultra Protos. So it was more than like 1.5 months we had a discussion. So I just made it with the VIP label, so I'll remove it. So the changes are fixed now. So maybe anyone can go through the patch set and get back to me. So if there are some issues with the Protos, then we can fix it. We can have that in place, I think.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the JIRA for that though.
From what I'm seeing, the patch set is still looking at work in progress. That's why I was not even looking at it.
Okay.
It's Vol 2157.
2157. Okay.
Yeah, you can. That's the one. That's the correct one.
Yeah. Okay, it's not technically in the stabilization brigade, which is why we're not seeing it. Okay, so it's dependent on Volta 2157. So this needs to be removed.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
So we need to change that to not a work in progress.
Sure, I'll do that.
Yep. Seven and patch set. Okay. To remove label. All right. And that will then get that reviewed, and code changes can be, it looks like it's also going to be rebased. But then we can go from there. So do we have any estimate of when that implementation of that will be done? I mean, other than, that was just the proto changes, right? Yeah, that's just the proto changes. Do we have any ETA for the actual implementation?
And
Changes?
there will be changes in both in all the adapters and the core when it comes to the state. So it will be a big change, and the change will be it will have to be coordinated, and there will be like back and forth a number of times before we get it right.
Are those JIRAs even created for those?
I think there is. It's if you go back to that epic there.
Okay.
I think it's part of the. Click on the apex. There should be an apex.
Yeah, so there's all these.
Yep.
But again, these are not marked in the stabilization brigade. So if we're going to consider this part of the stabilization brigade work, we need to add these 6 items to that.
I think that's fair. I
Yep.
think these can all get the stabilization label. The other epic that is not in stabilization is the Volta transaction level change. I've forgotten the name of that, but that has an impact on scale. So I think that we are tracking anyway.
Okay. Move volt 2156 into stabilization. I'll move those. I'll take that action to move those things in. All right. Any other?
Just one quick question about that. Like, given the extent of changes that will be required for all the adapters and the core, and the focus on getting something stable for 2.3, do we want to include state changes for that release?
That's a fair question. I honestly just don't know how much instability this is going to bring into it, and if we don't have these changes, what do we lose in terms of the release?
I mean, I will be fine not bringing it in, but still fixing the reboot issues, right? We can't really claim that something is stable if the moment the hardware reboots, everything goes to hell.
Agreed on that. The question, the real question is, do we wait on this proto change and everything else till after 2.3?
That's the thing, right? The claim made by Chetashri was that she doesn't want to fix the reboot issues because she wants to wait for the state changes work to happen. And my belief is that even without waiting for the state changes work to happen, the reboot issues can be fixed.
Agreed. Agreed they can. The question is, do we say fix the reboot issues and then we push the work for state changes till post 2.3?
I would be fine with that.
What do we lose if we do that?
I don't think we'll lose anything because the state changes was mostly cleanup. It makes everything like the way we would like things to be, and it doesn't prevent the system to be stable or operating as expected.
But do we lose a diagnostic issue? I mean, because we don't have all the states that we once had.
David, your dog.
That's not my dog. My dog does do that though.
The dogs are not happy
The dog.
with that state changes.
Yeah.
Who let them out?
Yes. So my dog does do that occasionally. Unfortunately, it wasn't my dog this time. Again, what we went down the state change path for a reason, and I'm struggling to remember what that reason was right now. But and to say we're going to postpone it means we're not going to have it in the 2.3 release. And is that going to be a problem? Anybody remember why we went down the thing? Is it really just to have a cleaner state machine, which is good?
Well, I think there was some cases where maybe the states didn't make all that much sense. So it was more like, okay, if such and such things happen, why does this still report to be in this state? It's better that it reports to be in some other state.
Right.
Makes more logical sense.
I think it was something to do with was like the thing was being shutting down or being disabled, but it was not fully disabled yet. And the state was saying it's disabled, although it was still processing and this kind of thing. That was a state issue.
Right.
But it didn't affect functionality. As far as I know, it was more of a reporting thing. So I still call for, fixing the reboot issue, pushing the state changes work to beyond 2.3.
Are there any objections to that? And do we need to take this to the TST meeting for kind of an official blessing?
I think the last state change when being disabled, it was still like processing and it was causing issues because it was still in the process of disconnecting the ports. And although it was saying it's disabled, somebody could have, like somebody was deleting the device, although it was being.
I don't see any problem in our tests, to be honest.
But is there a security loophole?
I don't know about that one.
I don't know. I think it's all, there may have been, I don't know. But right now, if you can't give me a specific example, I still say that, let's fix what we know is broken, such as the reboots. And with a month left in the release, I would much rather have the reboot thing fixed than bring in all this churn from the state changes work.
Again, I'm kind of okay with that. The question is, do we need to take this to the TST meeting to make sure we have a full visibility on this before we make a decision?
I think.
I mean, we've been running things through the G5. So, as long as the G5 is comfortable with that, I think we're fine.
I think it would be wise to at least let TT and DT know that we are not going to support the state changes at this release.
Yeah, those are things that we do in the Tiger team, which is, I think it's okay.
As long as we notify them and they're okay, go with it.
All right, so that's fair. All right.
So Chetashri, can we, is it okay? Amit Ghosh, is that okay? Let's work on this reboot case. Let's get that fixed. Even soft reboot and hard reboot.
Yeah, sure, sir.
Without
I'll
waiting.
look onto that.
Yeah.
And move and get started on reboot issues. All right. All right. All right. Fair enough. Moving down to 2641. Flow, add, or remove errors from OpenLT adapter are not propagated back to core. What's the status of this one?
I think there's too much on Chatashri's plate.
Okay.
Yeah, I have started working on this. Maybe tomorrow I'll submit pass it on this. No blockers.
If there's someone, okay, the question is, if you got you're already doing the reboot, right? So the question is, we need to move this off to someone else then, right? So we can
So
get
where is
working
Avilash?
currently.
Is Avilash on the call? Amit, do you know where Avilash is these days? What's he working on? Matt, do you know? Matt, you work with Avilash.
No, I don't.
So, okay, so why don't we start at least taking this off Chetshiri's plate and marking it as unassigned, and we need to find someone else to pick this one up. Volt 2641. As unassigned, need to find someone to pick up. All right. Moving on down. 2091. Yuresh, OpenLT adapter should continue to retry connections to KV Store and Kafka on startup. I thought this was done. Do we have a status? Let me go see what we got on this one. See if it...
Sorry, I was talking on mute. Sorry. Yeah, I think.
Did you go back and mute?
He's muted again.
Hello.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm sure there's something wrong with my mute button. Okay. Yeah, etcd actually is working fine. So if the connection to etcd is down, it actually recovers back and starts working. There's one minor thing that it gets blocked. The liveness check blocks completely. I probably would introduce a timeout in the context to do that. On the Kafka, what I have noticed is I just tested out a Kafka connection. Found that if Kafka goes down and comes back up, somehow the client is not able to recover from that condition, and it goes into one of the fatal errors, and which causes the container to restart. So ultimately, container would detect that Kafka has come back up, but it restarts based on because of some fatal error. So sometimes it is not able to find the right offset. There are two kind of fatal I'm observing. So is that a okay behavior that let the OLT adapter restart when the Kafka comes back up after a, let's say, a period of unreachability?
So Kafka goes down, Kafka comes up, the OLT adapter cannot reestablish the connection and therefore exits.
Yes, it establishes, but this one of the errors, other error is coming. So one error I'm getting is, let's say Kafka was down at the start of the container itself. It keeps on trying it out, and when it comes back up, I'm finding that it is not able to, I guess, find the offset where to read from.
When you're bringing Kafka down and then back up, are you destroying the Kafka implementation, or are you like network partitioning it to make it go down?
I'm bringing it down by scaling it down.
I'm just wondering if part of the data store for Kafka went away and came back.
Mm-hmm.
So in the situation you have now, Kafka comes back up, it basically restarts the OpenOLT connector and everything reconnects.
Yes. In both
So
the
there's
conditions, yeah. So in both the conditions, whether Kafka was up at the start of OpenOLT adapter, or it was up, it was down at the start of OpenOLT adapter.
So it sounds like there's a state that's not being cleaned up around the Kafka connection somewhere. Because
Yeah.
if restarting the OpenOLT fixes it, you know, it should be able to be fixed without restarting the OpenOLT.
Just one comment on that one. It's are you using when you're using Kafka, are you using a partition consumer or a cluster consumer in the OpenOLT?
I'm sorry, I could not get your question.
When you're in the OpenOLT, when you're using the Kafka, when you're connecting, are you using a partition consumer? Because there are different kind of consumers. Are you using the partition consumer or are you using the other one? I think the other one is a cluster consumer or something like that. I forgot the name.
I'm not too sure because I need to probably, I think, explore that part. I can say as a partition consumer, I believe we're consuming it, but I'm using the full profile of the kind Volta. I'm not sure
Okay.
how that
No,
is.
it's more like no, it's from the code when you're creating your connection to Kafka. I don't know if you're just strictly using the library or using something else. Because with the partition consumer, you need to. There's a lot of cleanup that are required. But with the cluster one, it's supposed to come back up unless Kafka is in such a bad state, you just can't recover from it.
Okay, I don't have answers to that question because I'm still trying to understand those two errors which I'm getting related to Kafka connection, why it is going to fatal condition. But yeah, in a day, probably I would have the right answer on that.
By the way, is your Kafka clustered, or are you just have one instance and you're scaling it down to 0?
It is not clustered. It is a single instance scaling down, and that's I think that's what I'm saying. I think it's I'm using that kind Volta full profile. Even then, there I found that Kafka there is a single container which is getting created. Unlike etcd, right? etcd there are 3 different containers are created, so you can bring down one of the others and change the service service selection to kind of emulate a situation when etcd is not reachable, right? But
Yeah,
Kafka I
so
could
I'm
not do that.
wondering about your test. I mean, right? I would be comfortable with you running a Kafka cluster and scaling the cluster down from 3 to 2 and then going back from 2 to 3.
Okay.
Entirely getting rid of Kafka. I don't know if that's
hopefully something that doesn't happen in production, because if it does, there's other issues.
exactly. I mean, it's like saying we completely get rid of I don't know, etcd also, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's something that you have to worry about right now. It's
So
more
let
like
me
up and down a cluster element, right? And making sure things are still operational, but not making it 0.
Yeah, I mean that way I think etcd also cannot go down, right? But you can basically somehow make it unreachable, right? But etcd would not completely go down, even sometimes the service may not behave correctly, right?
Which is where Scott's comment about network partitioning comes in. It's reasonable to say you are network partitioned from etcd or Kafka, but that's different from them going away, from them going down.
Right.
Yeah, and I have a couple of scripts someplace if you want, where I was I wrote some scripts to simulate network partitions by running running IP tables inside the containers. A technique I got from the Onos guys. They have a tool that does it too.
Yeah, I think
Micro
you
Onos
should
guys.
refocus your tests on that particular story to scaling up, down, but not making 0.
Okay, I will do that. I think probably create a Kafka cluster and test it out.
Right. Every network system has some level of redundancy, and if you go beyond that redundancy, well, yeah, things are going to break, right?
Okay.
So
So in case Kafka is able to recover, right, when testing against the cluster, right, because the cluster state would at least would get maintained. I guess we are okay, right? Then there's nothing else needs to be done.
So, right. So as I just commented in the chat, when we talk about connectivity to Kafka and etcd, I think the test should be about network connectivity, losing connectivity, not the service actually going down or losing quorum.
Okay.
So that's the test case.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, sure.
Running out of time here. Saurabh, you wanted to go over the bugs. I just filtered down to bugs. Was there anything in particular you wanted to bring up in the last 8 minutes?
Not at the moment. I think it's been a really useful discussion of just walking through the ones that we have walked through, and we should continue doing that on every stabilization call, I feel.
Okay.
And the action items we've taken from this is pretty good. So in the remaining 8 minutes, if you can go through a few more, that'll be great.
Yep,
I don't have
that's fine.
anything high on my list.
All right, let me go back to sometimes the editor doesn't want to be friendly. I think this is where we were. Where were we? Is this the right one? Now I've lost it. Which were we on?
Okay. And all the device state ones I'm going to move to future, so they will disappear from your view.
Yeah, I think that I thought the next one up was the one Suchitra had about deadline exceeded in Volt Cuddle, which would be nice to come up with a solution for that when doing scale tests. Maybe scale tests are out of scope right now, but I know anytime I've done a scale test, it's really a pain losing Volt Cuddle. You can get around it by setting the gRPC timeout to a sort of crazy large value like 120 seconds, but still we need to figure out some API change or something there.
Well, I actually, this is more than just an API change. Well, maybe not. So this really goes to if we're dealing with large number of devices, that when Volt Cuddle makes a gRPC call, it doesn't get a response within the deadline, which is a gRPC change, which basically says Volta needs to be able to do back end sorting, querying, paging to support large scale. Right? I don't think this is something that's going to be fixable in 2.3 because it is a significant change.
And it's also not just Volt Cuddle. I think some of the components will query a list of devices, like from an adapter to a core or OF agent to something. I know I saw it somewhere inside of a component. The component was timing out due to the same issue Volt Cuddle was running into, that you have the 10
OF
seconds and
agent
it
does
kills it.
that for sure.
Pardon?
OF agent queries for the list of logical device, and if the gRPC is not responding, then OF agent reports the device as offline to ONOS, and that causes a cascade of retries.
In terms of Volt Cuddle in particular, the fix shouldn't be too hard because the Volt Cuddle shouldn't really have a deadline. It should just be continue trying to run until you Control-C the program. But that doesn't actually solve the core issue of we have to have timeout from somewhere. And upon whatever, I don't know.
The problem is if you run Volt Cuddle, if you run a client that says, "Hey, continue until I break you," you never really know if the client's still actually running or you're really locked. Right? You don't know the reason you haven't completed.
Which is fair. It's just that it's a command line, so I expect the user to be more involved, more.
So okay, do we want to change Volt Cuddle to? You have to have some timeout. I think gRPC requires it, doesn't it?
No, you can just pass a blank context or
context.
Better just attach the context to the program execution. So you have like
Questions?
a global context that gets canceled if you get a signal.
Okay.
Anyways, I don't think that's the core of this issue, right? Like this is it's more of it's a larger question of timeouts. I don't think specifically changing the volt cuddle will solve it. I just wanted to point out that this particular JIRA would be relatively easy to fix because it specifies volt cuddle.
But even if we do so, OF agent is still broken.
Right.
So we can query the system, but the system doesn't work. The other thing with volt cuddle, I know David and I have talked about this previously, but it'd be really nice to be able to do queries on the server side. So if you wanted to get a state about a particular ONU, you don't have to query all 256 of them and put up with the 60-second time that it takes to get that when you're only looking for one. But these are all like maybe 2.4 volt cuddle enhancements.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this issue so that the one we can, unless it's objections, we'll make volt cuddle have unlimited timeout. I'll default it to unlimited timeout, and then a separate issue to speak to post 2.3 issues about server-side sorting, filtering, that type of stuff. That fair?
Sounds good to me.
Makes sense.
And then the OF agent problem with timing out, is that yet another issue?
Yeah, we'll have to. Is there a JIRA for that one specifically already?
I have not seen one, but I have not gone looking for it either.
I'll create that JIRA.
Well, there may have been a JIRA. There was one I opened up. I put it into, I looked into it. It was about OF agent. I think it was about OF agent crashing, but it may have been timeouts. And we decided to put it back on to do while we were waiting for Ken's transaction patch to come in. But I would have to look up that number for you. But there was something that it might fit under.
Okay, I'll take a look, and if not, I'll create one. If I create an extra one, we can always mark it as dupe and move on from there. All right, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you, everyone. Lots of good stuff this time. We'll continue next week to walk down this. If you guys need help, please reach out on the Slack channel, and we'll go from there. Anyone have final comments before we end the meeting? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.